Under the dim glow of an airport at dawn, a police dog erupted into frantic barks at a sleek traveler's suitcase, sending a chill through the officer at its side. The traveler played it cool, but his eyes betrayed a dark, unthinkable secret. When they pried open the bag, the airport reeled in shock at what lay hidden. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. Thank you. The stark fluorescent beams bathed Terminal 3 of Chicago O'Hare International Airport in a cold light as Officer Ava Sullivan tugged her winter duty coat tighter, her exhales forming faint clouds in the early morning frost, creeping through the sliding doors. At her side, Zeus, her German Shepherd companion of 4 years, held an impeccable heel, his keen eyes sweeping over the constant flow of passengers with seasoned focus. Ava glanced at her watch. 5:45 a.m. Soon, the rush of international arrivals would pour in, unleashing the familiar frenzy she'd mastered in her 6 years with the airport's K-9 team, though an odd unease hung in the December air, tingling her senses. "Up for another shift, pal," she whispered, bending to rub Zeus's ear. The shepherd nudged into her hand for a moment before resuming his watchful stance, prompting a faint grin from Ava as she recalled their first meeting at the training center. Zeus stood apart from other police dogs, steadier, more deliberate, with an almost eerie knack for sizing up scenes, a skill that had preserved lives on multiple occasions. The terminal stirred with dawn travelers, their wheeled bags clattering in a steady cadence across the glossy tiles. Zeus glided smoothly among the crowd and luggage, executing his standard security scans with disciplined exactness, casting a quick look back at Ava every so often, a silent testament to their years of teamwork. "Morning, Sullivan," Officer Noah Bradley shouted from his spot by the screening area. "Zeus is on point as always." Ava tipped her head in reply, her eyes tracking Zeus's efforts, his black and tan fur shining under the overhead glare, his motions fluid despite his sturdy build. They just cleared the upscale shopping zone when Zeus's demeanor subtly altered, a shift so minor only Ava could catch it. His ears perked up, nostrils flaring as he honed in on an unseen trace. Her heartbeat ticked faster, instinct honed over time, urging her to heed her partner's cues. Zeus had never misjudged, not once in 4 years. Amid the cluster of high-end suitcases by the elite check-in counter, Zeus zeroed in on a bespoke leather trunk, likely pricier than Ava's monthly paycheck. Its owner, a sharply dressed Asian man in his 40s, lingered close by, engrossed in his sleek smartphone, murmuring into a wireless earpiece. Zeus's stance shifted starkly. What had been relaxed patrol morphed into taut readiness, tail stiff and frame coiled. Ava knew that signal. It wasn't his usual response to banned goods or drugs. This was something else entirely. "Sir," Ava stepped toward the man, her tone calm yet firm as she placed herself between him and the closest escape route. "I'm Officer Sullivan with Airport Police. Could you please bring your bag over here?" The man lifted his gaze from his screen, his face a flawless display of courteous bewilderment. "Is there a problem, officer?" His English was perfect, his manner cultured and confident. The name tag on his luxury trunk read Vincent Lee, with first-class stickers from multiple international carriers. "Just a routine check, sir. Your cooperation would be appreciated." Ava watched as Lee's eyes darted between her, Zeus, and the terminal exits. Years of training had taught her to spot the subtle tells, the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his manicured fingers tightened around his phone. Zeus's low growl rumbled through the terminal, drawing curious glances from passing travelers. This wasn't just alert behavior anymore. This was a warning. Ava had only heard this specific vocalization twice before in their partnership, and both times had led to major cases. "My flight to Vancouver leaves in 40 minutes, Lee protested, his composure cracking slightly. "I have an important business meeting. This won't take long if everything's in order, Mr. Lee," Ava interrupted, noting how he flinched at the use of his name. Zeus positioned himself between Lee and his luggage, his training kicking in without command. The terminal's morning hum receded to a dull murmur as Ava activated her radio, Control, K97 needs support at the elite check-in. Terminal 3, potential issue brewing. Her gaze stayed locked on Lee, who'd paused, his phone tapping, his initial annoyance giving way to a colder, more deliberate air. Zeus's growl intensified as Lee subtly shifted his stance, poised for action. Ava knew that expression. The split second a suspect weighs obedience against flight. Her fingers edged toward her sidearm. "Sir, stay put," she ordered, though Lee's calculating stare and tightening frame betrayed his intent. The terminal seemed to freeze as Zeus's menacing rumble peaked. Time stretched thin as Lee chose his move. With a swift flick, he flung his phone at Ava's head and darted off, toppling a baggage trolley into Zeus's way. Ava dodged, the device whizzing past as Zeus nimbly skirted the scattered luggage with the finesse that had earned him renown in the K9 squad. "Halt! Airport police!" Ava's shout pierced the terminal's uproar as she gave chase, Zeus weaving to cut off their quarry. Passengers parted in a flurry, some whipping out phones to record the pursuit. Lee's pricey leather soles tapped sharply on the sleek floor, his nimble dodges slicing through the throng. "Terminal 3, Gate 7. Suspect heading east," Ava relayed, her breathing even, honed by years of drills. "Asian male, dark gray suit, around 40. Zeus had already mapped Lee's path, darting through a gap between ticket desks to intercept him. Officer Noah Bradley emerged at the concourse's far end, pushing Lee to swerve abruptly into the service hallways. That's when Ava's stomach dropped. She caught Lee fiddling with a tiny gadget in his palm just before bolting. "Possible remote trigger device Obisabayu," she reported to dispatch, tailing Zeus through the access hatch. Flickering fluorescence cast eerie shadows down the tight passage, the stark light playing tricks as they hunted their mark, the air growing frigid enough to miss their breaths. Zeus's sharp bark bounced off the concrete walls, his distinct signal they were nearing the target. The echo hadn't fully died when a pile of plastic bins toppled behind them, sealing their way back. Lee had used his fleeting lead well. "You should have let me walk, Officer Sullivan." Lee's voice ricocheted around, its source elusive. "Some mysteries aren't worth chasing." The faint roar of jet engines thrummed through the building, muddling the soundscape further. Ava advanced warily, Zeus beside her, both probing the dimness for any stir. "Mr. Lee, you're just digging a deeper hole," she shouted, catching the sound of reinforcements locking down the outer doors. "Whatever's going on, we can sort it out." A mocking chuckle rang through the hallway. "Sort it out? Like Officer Grant tried to in Seattle 3 months back?" The name slammed into Ava like a fist. Lydia Grant, a K9 officer sidelined after a supposedly simple bag inspection, her case buried under instant secrecy. Zeus's ears snapped up, his head jerking toward a side utility closet. Ava edged closer, gun ready, the door slightly open, a chill draft spilling into the already cold space. There in the room's center, Lee's lavish trunk stood out, its clasps now pulsing with a sinister blue gleam. "Remarkable creatures, police dogs," Lee's voice drifted from the gloom. "Such devotion, such an extraordinary nose. Ever ponder why Zeus flags certain cargoes differently?" Ava's flashlight sliced through the murk, exposing barren chemical racks and strewn tools. Zeus's growl sharpened, not pursuit now, but a dire alert. Something about that trunk was gravely off. "Terminal 3, Maintenance Sector C," Ava radioed. "Need hazmat and bomb squad? Possible CBR risk." She remembered Zeus's unusual reaction upstairs, unlike his normal alerts for drugs or explosives. Lee hadn't just been smuggling contraband, this was something far more sinister. "Smart girl." Lee emerged from behind a large electrical panel, his earlier executive demeanor completely gone. "But you're a bit late. The countdown started the moment I triggered the failsafe. You have a choice now, Officer Sullivan. Chase me or deal with that trunk. You can't do both." As if on cue, the trunk's latches began pulsing faster, a faint hissing sound barely audible over the building's mechanical systems. Zeus's bark became more insistent, pushing Ava back from the doorway with his body, a behavior he'd only exhibited during their chemical detection training. The sound of running feet and radio static told Ava backup was nearly there. Lee smiled, pulling a small oxygen mask from his jacket pocket, "Time to decide, officer. Your dog knows what's in that trunk. The question is, are you willing to bet everyone's lives that you can stop both me and it?" Ava's mind raced through protocols, training scenarios, everything she'd learned in 6 years of canine work. Nothing had prepared her for this moment. Zeus looked up at her, waiting for command, trusting her completely despite the growing danger. The trunk's hissing grew louder. "Zeus, guard!" The command was barely out of her mouth when her partner sprang into action, launching himself at Lee with precision that came from countless training hours. The oxygen mask went flying as Zeus took Lee down, his jaws securing a hold on the suspect's arm with controlled pressure. Enough to stop him, not enough to cause serious injury. Ava rushed to the trunk, her heart pounding. Here's a rewritten version of the passage with altered wording, but the same core content preserved in American English, US. Upon closer inspection, it was clear the trunk wasn't merely luxurious leather. Its interior housed an advanced containment mechanism, paired with what appeared to be a high-tech pressure control system embedded in the structure. The class linked to a rapidly ticking timer, its pace unsettlingly swift. "Control! Suspect detained!" Ava radioed sharply. "But get the hazmat crew here fast. Zeus is signaling chemical detection, potential airborne hazard." Reinforcements stormed in, a surge of tactical vests and flashing beacons. As officers restrained Lee, Ava noticed his stunned expression. He hadn't anticipated her ability to neutralize both him and the trunk. He'd underestimated the unbreakable bond between handler and canine, the fluid coordination that turned split-second choices into second nature. Yet as the hazmat team charged forward with their detectors and protective gear, Ava sensed this was only the start. Lee's remarks about Officer Grant and Zeus's distinct responses pointed to a conspiracy far beyond a lone smuggling run. Whatever lurked inside that trunk would upend everything. She felt it deep in her core. Zeus padded back to her, watchful yet composed now that the urgent danger was under control. Ava rubbed his ears, observing how the tactical squad kept a respectful distance. "Good job, boy," she murmured, "but I suspect we're just warming up." The hazmat sensors erupted in shrill alerts. 3 hours later, Ava sat in the airport's fortified debriefing room, Zeus lounging by her seat. His sharp eyes occasionally followed the flurry of Homeland Security agents and CDC personnel darting about. Their muted exchanges tinged with restrained alarm. The trunk's contents had set off every warning in the hazmat arsenal. But Zeus's peculiar reaction had everyone on edge. As another cluster of officials in suits hurried by, Ava's thoughts drifted to her first encounter with Zeus, 2 years after a case that nearly broke her. That steamy August morning at the Kentucky Canine Training Center had been stifling, the air heavy with moisture and canine clamor. Ava hadn't wanted to be there. Her boss had all but mandated she find a new partner after a year and a half behind a desk. "You've got to see this one, Sullivan," Sergeant Isabel Hayes had urged, guiding her to an isolated kennel. "He's unique, pulled from a rough spot, but his nose is unmatched. Trouble is, he won't pair with just anyone." Ava had been poised to walk away, the pain of losing her last partner still too fresh. K-9 officer Caleb Foster had been more than a colleague. He'd been her guide, shaping her into the handler she became. The ambush that took him left her with lingering wounds, both inside and out, including a jagged mark along her left side that throbbed in the cold. Then she'd met those eyes. Zeus, unnamed back then, had regarded her with a near-human awareness, standing apart from the yapping, restless pack by quietly assessing her, head cocked as if peering into her essence. "We got him from a bust on an illicit lab," Hayes had said gently. "They were tinkering with boosting dog scent detection. Most didn't make it through the test, but this one..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "He picks up what others miss. Even our top gear sometimes can't catch it, but what he went through left him wary of trust." Ava recalled crouching despite her stiff limbs, locking eyes with him. Zeus had edged nearer with caution, scars peeking through his coat. When he'd finally nudged his head into her palm, Hayes had let out a quiet gasp. "That's the first time he's gone to anyone on his own," she'd breathed. "I think he sees something in you, Sullivan. The worst scars can forge the tightest ties." A soft bump against her leg snapped Ava back to the moment. Zeus had felt her unease at the recollection, offering his steady presence as always. She grinned, reflecting on how they'd mended each other in the years since. Officer Sullivan, a CDC official, approached, his badge naming him Dr. Owen. "We need to discuss how your partner reacted to what we found." He settled across from her, his face etched with seriousness. "Have you ever seen him alert like that before?" Ava straightened in her chair. "Twice," she confirmed. "Once at a cargo facility in Detroit, but the shipment disappeared before we could investigate. The second time was..." She paused, her throat tightening. "The second time was the day Officer Grant was hospitalized in Seattle." Dr. Owen leaned forward. "Tell me about Seattle." "It was a routine assistance call," Ava recalled. Lydia, Officer Grant, had requested Zeus specifically. Her own canine had alerted to something in a diplomatic shipment, but they needed confirmation before they could breach international protocols. Zeus reacted the same way he did today, trying to push us back from the container. Before we could secure the area, there was some kind of pressure release. Lydia was closest. She swallowed hard. She survived, but she's still in long-term care. The case was classified immediately. "And you never questioned why they specifically requested Zeus?" Ava met his gaze steadily. Zeus's background isn't exactly secret in canine circles. Some handlers call him the miracle dog because of his unusual detection abilities after what he survived in that testing facility. "That testing facility," Dr. Owen interrupted, "is exactly why we're here." He placed a file on the table. "What your partner detected today wasn't just any chemical weapon. It was something engineered to be undetectable by standard methods. Something that only a dog with enhanced olfactory capabilities could smell." He paused significantly. "Something like what they were trying to create in the facility where Zeus was found." The implications hit Ava like a physical blow. Zeus pressed against her leg, grounding her as the pieces started falling into place. The diplomatic shipments, Lydia's classified case, Lee's specific comments about Zeus's abilities. "They're weaponizing the research," she breathed. "The same people who..." She looked down at Zeus, at the scars hidden beneath his fur, and felt a surge of protective rage. "How high up does this go?" Dr. Owen's expression was grim. "That's what we need to find out. And right now, your partner is our best chance at tracking these shipments. The question is, are you prepared for what that means? These people have already shown they'll do anything to protect their operation." Ava felt Zeus's solid presence beside her, remembered the trust in his eyes that first day at the training facility. They both survived attempts to break them, had forged something stronger from their shared pain. Now they had a chance to stop the people responsible, not just for Lydia's injury, but for all the dogs who hadn't survived that testing facility. "When do we start?" she asked, her hand resting on Zeus's head. A commotion outside the briefing room interrupted Dr. Owen's response. Agent Hayes, now with Homeland Security, burst in, her face pale. "We've got a problem," she announced. "Lee's diplomatic credentials just cleared. His people are here to take him into custody, claiming diplomatic immunity." She met Ava's eyes, and they're demanding the return of their property. Zeus's low growl echoed through the room. The underground parking level of O'Hare's Terminal 3 echoed with footsteps as Ava and Zeus took position behind a concrete pillar. Above them, the diplomatic security team was preparing to transport Lee and his diplomatic cargo, a move that would erase any chance of exposing the operation. "All units in position," crackled Ava's earpiece. Dr. Owen and Agent Hayes had worked quickly, coordinating with trusted FBI units to set up an intercept. They had one chance to prevent Lee's extraction, but the risk was enormous. One wrong move could trigger an international incident. Ava checked her tactical vest, then looked at Zeus. His eyes were fixed on the service elevator, the only way up from this level. They'd been through countless operations together, but never with stakes this high. "Target descending," came the alert. 4-man security detail, 2 diplomatic officials. Lee is wearing a suit with biohazard protection underneath. They're moving the trunk separately. Ava felt her scar twinge in the garage's cold air, remembering another underground confrontation that had ended in tragedy. As if sensing her thoughts, Zeus pressed briefly against her leg, their private signal that he had her back. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime that seemed impossibly loud in the tense silence. Lee emerged first, flanked by men whose expensive suits couldn't quite hide their military bearing. Behind them, two more agents wheeled the trunk on a specialized cart, its latches now dark and inactive. "Zeus, find," Ava whispered. It was a variation of their training command, one they'd developed over years of partnership. Zeus began moving silently through the shadows, using the parked vehicles as cover, while Ava maintained visual on the group. Lee was speaking rapidly in Mandarin to one of the officials, his confidence fully restored now that he believed himself protected by diplomatic immunity. That's when Zeus gave the signal, a specific head tilt that told Ava he'd found something. "Control, K9 unit confirms additional devices in their vehicle," Ava said softly into her radio. "Same signature as the trunk." "Copy that," Agent Hayes responded. "That's our probable cause. All units, prepare to move on my mark." Ava watched as the group approached their waiting convoy. 3 black SUVs with diplomatic plates. They were almost to the vehicles when Zeus's head snapped toward the trunk. Ava had learned to trust those instincts without question. "The trunk's reactivating," she shouted into her radio. "All units, chemical threat active." Everything happened at once. The security team reached for weapons as FBI teams emerged from cover. Lee lunged for the trunk's control panel, while his diplomatic escort shouted about international law and sovereignty. But Ava's focus was entirely on Zeus, who had already launched into action. With incredible precision, Zeus targeted the handler, pushing the trunk's cart, knocking him away from the device without seriously injuring him. Ava moved simultaneously, using the distraction to tackle Lee before he could reach the controls. Years of training with Zeus made them an almost supernatural team, each anticipating the other's moves. "Everybody down!" Dr. Owen's voice boomed through the garage as a hazmat team rushed in, chemical containment protocols in effect. Lee struggled beneath Ava's grip, his carefully cultivated poise shattered. "You have no idea what you're interrupting," he snarled. "This is bigger than countries, bigger than laws. We're trying to advance human potential. By torturing dogs?" Ava tightened her hold as Zeus kept the other security members at bay. "By experimenting on innocent animals until you found one that survived? By turning that research into weapons?" "That dog," Lee spat, glaring at Zeus, "is proof that our methods work. Enhanced senses, increased intelligence. Imagine those capabilities in human subjects." The rage Ava felt at his words must have shown in her face because Lee actually flinched. "Zeus," she called, her voice steady despite her anger. "Guard." Zeus immediately took up position, watching Lee, allowing Ava to assist with securing the other suspects. The hazmat team had already contained the trunk, preventing whatever release Lee had tried to trigger. "Officer Sullivan," Agent Hayes approached, looking grimly satisfied. "The diplomatic credentials just came back flagged. They're forgeries. High quality, but definitely fake. Lee and his entire team are being taken into federal custody." Ava nodded, watching as Lee was led away in handcuffs, his dreams of diplomatic immunity evaporating. Zeus returned to her side, and she knelt to check him over, remembering all he'd survived to reach this moment. "Good boy," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. Around them, federal agents were already coordinating with international authorities, the conspiracy Lee had helped expose beginning to unravel. But for Ava, the most important victory was the one standing right beside her, proof that sometimes the deepest wounds really did create the strongest bonds. 1 month after the Lee's arrest, Ava stood at her usual post in Terminal 3, watching the morning sun stream through the massive windows. Zeus sat alertly beside her, his new commendation medal catching the light. The events of that December morning had changed airport security protocols across the country. But for Ava, the biggest changes were more personal. The investigation had uncovered a network spanning 3 continents, leading to the liberation of dozens of dogs from testing facilities similar to the one where Zeus had been found. Lydia Grant had wept when Ava visited her in recovery, sharing the news that the people responsible for her injuries were finally facing justice. "You've got quite a partner there, Doctor," Owen had said during the final briefing. Watching Zeus charm the entire federal task force, despite his fierce reputation. His enhanced abilities may have been forced on him through cruel experiments, but what he chose to do with those abilities. That's all him and you. Ava smiled now, remembering the ceremony where Zeus had received his commendation. He'd remained perfectly composed as the chief of police attached the medal, but his tail had started wagging the moment Ava knelt to hug him. Some bonds went beyond training, beyond duty, beyond even the incredible capabilities science could enhance. A young girl approached cautiously, her mother hovering nearby. "Can I pet him?" she asked, eyes wide with admiration. Ava looked at Zeus, who was already gently wagging his tail. "Of course," Ava replied, watching as Zeus delicately accepted the child's attention. Looking at him now, few would guess the trauma in his past or the sophisticated biological modifications that made him unique among canines. What showed instead was his heart, his choice to use his abilities to protect, to serve, to forge a partnership that had helped bring down an international conspiracy. "He's a hero," the girl declared solemnly, making Ava smile. "Yes, he is," she agreed, scratching Zeus's ears. "But more importantly, he's my partner." Zeus looked up at her with those intelligent eyes, and Ava felt that familiar surge of gratitude. Wow, what an emotional ride we've just shared. This isn't just about a police dog and an officer stopping a terrifying threat. It's a powerful testament to teamwork and trust, rising above the deepest scars. Have you ever imagined a dog could change the world with nothing but grit and love? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button, like and share to spread this incredible inspiration. Thanks for being here with me. See you in the next video, and keep believing in the magic of unbreakable bonds.